ChatGerry Emotional Sensitivity and Aging in the VPT Method, number 1499, VPT Sharp 060, January 10, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation Category, Humanity, Aging, Neuropsychology, Neuro-biophysics. Preface. Over the past few days, I wrote 2 papers on the hemoglobin A1C gap in diabetes. Today, I shifted to a very different topic, emotional softening with aging. On the surface, this may look random. It is not. Both topics follow the same internal logic. They use the same systems framework to study how time, accumulation, and repeated loading change human behavior and outcomes. In my diabetes work, I showed why CGM-derived A1C often differs from lab-tested hemoglobin A1C. Lab A1C is an average. It hides spikes, timing, and variability. CGM reveals the true flow of glucose over time. Damage does not come from averages. It comes from repeated excursions and accumulated energy. Emotion works the same way. Emotional sensitivity does not suddenly appear. It accumulates. Years of charity work, repeated life-threatening medical events, long-term health management, and declining physical reserve slowly load the system. Emotional defenses that once protected survival gradually soften. When I wrote about Japanese prisoners of war in Siberia, my tears fell. That moment was not sudden. It was the result of decades of accumulated loading. This is not a jump from diabetes to psychology. It is the same framework, applied to 2 different surfaces of the same human system. Glucose regulation and emotional response are both time-dependent flows. Both rely on buffering capacity. Both cross thresholds. Both accelerate later in life. I do not collect topics. I follow structure. Where the system reveals truth, I follow. Background. The human biomedical system is one of the most complex systems in existence. It is nonlinear, time-dependent, history-dependent, and irreversible. This is not a metaphor. It is physics. The body contains solids, fluids, soft tissues, membranes, cells, organs, and layered control systems. These systems deform, recover partially, accumulate damage, and retain memory. Time is not external. It is embedded. Elastic models work only briefly and locally. They fail when applied to long-term disease or aging. Using elastic thinking to explain chronic illness is like using Hooke's law to explain metal fatigue after 30 years. Statistics became dominant in medicine because it avoids building a constitutive model. It replaces causality with correlation. It smooths away history. It treats mortality cases as outliers. It treats spikes as noise. But in medicine, those spikes and mortality cases are often fatal. Engineering disciplines progressed faster because failure is visible and immediate. Bridges collapse, turbines crack, ships overheat. Engineers were forced to model fatigue, creep, accumulation, and irreversibility. Medicine often hid failure behind averages of population data and delayed outcomes. The human body is far more complex than a jet engine, yet it has often been described with simpler mathematics, not because it is simpler, but because medicine lacked the tools and willingness to model irreversible dynamics. In 2020, my MIT mentor, Professor Norman Jones, suggested I apply viscoplasticity to my medical research work. Since then, I have written 800 papers. Viscoplastic thinking fits biomedicine naturally. Chronic disease is not a state. It is a trajectory of progression, methodology and conceptual framework. This study applies VPT, viscoplastopology theory, to emotional sensitivity in aging. VPT integrates 2 components. First, the viscoplastic component models time-dependent, irreversible strain, accumulation and energy dissipation. It explains why systems appear stable for years and then change abruptly. Second, the topological component examines geometric shape, data point continuity and connectivity, and trajectory evolution. Health and disease are not labels. They are paths. Human physiology is neither purely solid nor purely fluid. It is both. Solid VMT applies to end stage of structures, like vessels, myocardium, connective tissue, and bone. Damage accumulates slowly and is largely irreversible. Fluid VMT applies to flows like blood pressure, glucose, hormones, and neural signals. Damage arises from spikes, oscillations, and instability, not averages. These 2 are tightly coupled. Fluid spikes damage solid structures. Structural stiffening amplifies fluid instability. This explains why systems fail suddenly after long quiet periods. Emotional sensitivity in this study is treated as a time-integrated strain response. It is not pathology. It is not personality. It is an adaptive outcome of long-term loading. Data structure. This study uses 8 life periods, T0 through T7, covering about 40 years, from 1986 through 2025. 1 output strain and 3 input stressors are defined. Output strain, empathy. Empathy represents emotional sensitivity and resonance with others' suffering. Scaled from 0 to 100. Stress 1, charity. Charity reflects sustained emotional and human burden, not money. It includes responsibility, engagement, and obligation. Stress 2, health. Health represents chronic physiological load. Lower values reflect successful unloading through lifestyle, not reversal of aging. Stress 3, threats. Threats represent peak life-threatening exposure. Severity matters more than frequency. VMT results. Empathy strain rises from 10 to 95 over time. The increase is nonlinear. The most rapid rise occurs during early business, success and large-scale charity years, when strain rate is highest. In viscoplastic systems, strain rate matters more than magnitude. Stress convergence peaks at empathy levels between 85 and 90. This represents maximum system loading, not failure. The system remains stable, reflecting adaptation driven by improved health, fewer mortality threats, and smaller but focused charity work. In summary, charity contributes about 45% of total VMT energy, and is the dominant long-term stressor. Health contributes about 24% and is modifiable. Threats contribute about 31% and appear as sharp peaks, nearly 80% of lifetime energy, accumulated early, when stress and strain rate coincided. Later periods add energy slowly, approaching saturation. My emotional softening in later life is not weakness, it is adaptive viscoplastic behavior. Topological insights. Topological analysis shows emotional sensitivity evolving as a continuous trajectory, not isolated events. The largest geometric shift occurs during the early high strain period, marking a phase transition. Later recovery follows a different path, confirming irreversibility. Threats appear as branches rather than defining the main trajectory. Charity and health form the backbone of long-term emotional evolution. Later periods show extension along the empathy axis, with reduced physiological reserve, not instability. Epilogue. After my stroke, I noticed that emotional stories move me more easily. At first, I questioned whether this was weakness. It is not. It is the result of decades of giving, illness, survival, and understanding. It reflects preserved humanity, not decline. This research began with outward neuropsychological observations, and then moved inward to explore the underlying neuro-biophysical mechanisms. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only, and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article, and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.